All right, so we're gonna start off on page 22. We're gonna go over the homework. And the homework all had to do with the life cycle of a stream. Remember, the number one rule of earth science is to read all the words, including this little paragraph at the top. It says base your answers to questions 1 through 5 on the diagram below. The diagram represents landscape features associated with a meandering river. Letters X, Y, W, X, Y, and Z represent locations on the floodplain. So then they show you some pictures. So part of reading all the words is even looking at the picture and kind of seeing what's there. So we've got a river here. It's very curvy. They show you what's called an oxbow lake. They show you a floodplain. Guys, we didn't talk about what a floodplain is, but can you figure out from the words, what do you think a floodplain is? A plain that floods. And what do you guys know about a plain? Flat land. Yep. So that's all a floodplain is. It's flat land that gets flooded from the river. Now, natural levees, we have no idea what that means. I've never mentioned it to you before, but you can see that they're at the edge of the river here. This is the Yazoo stream, so it's another little stream, and then this is labeled the river. Question 1 says the diagram below represents stages in the formation of a meandering river. Just talked about this in the notes that I put up there a second ago. A is showing a straight stream, B a little bit curvy, C very curvy. So which sequence represents the usual changes over time? What order do they go in? Yeah, they go in, they're in order, A, B, then C. So that's answer 1. Were you questioning it? Because you're like, they never put them in order? Yeah, they're very rarely in, but don't second guess yourself, guys. A computer picks these choices down here for the most part, usually. So just because it was the first one and it was in order, don't second guess yourself. If you know they go from straight to a little curvy to very curvy, just go with whichever one says that. All right, now it's saying which location is erosion the greatest? Is it W, X, Y, or Z? Something important to look at is where are these locations on the river? So if we see W over here, yeah, it's first of all, it's not near the river. That doesn't mean there's no erosion happening. So W is over on a hill. X, how would you describe where X is? This is on the outside of the curve. Where's Y? Y is on an inside of the curve. And Z is over here just hanging out on the floodplain. So we want to know which one's going to have the most erosion. What do you guys think? Okay, so either X or Y is what Cynthia's saying because they're both on the stream. So let's go with that. Will it be X or Y? We talked about something yesterday. Why is it X? Okay, so if you remember when we talked about the streams, the water will be always hitting the outside of the stream. That's where the river is moving the fastest. And so if it's moving fast, we're going to have lots of erosion. So that is X. The outside of the curve will always have more erosion than just about anywhere else. Now, like I said, I never talked about what a levee was. But good news is you don't have to memorize what a levee is. This is how they'll do a question about a levee. They'll say natural levees are ridges of sediments that slope away from the riverbank toward the floodplain. So they are ridges, which are basically piles of sediments next to, and they slope away from a river. Which process likely formed these levees? So again, a levee is a pile of sediment. Let's read through the answers and kind of break each one down. So one says weathering of the soil on the riverbank. What does weathering mean? No, it doesn't. One word to describe weathering. Breakdown. Remember, guys, and this might be something you really want to remember. Weathering means breaks or breaking. What does erosion mean? If weathering breaks sediment, what does erosion do? Nope, that's weathering. Weathering is the breaking, making things smaller. Moves it. Erosion is the moving of sediments. So what's deposition? Deposition is the dropping off. So weathering breaks it into smaller pieces. Erosion moves it, and deposition drops it off somewhere. So even though they all work together, once it's broken, it's going to get moved. Once it's moving, it's eventually going to stop. So even though they go together, they have 3 different definitions, and you need to know the definition of each. For example, in this question, the definition of weathering is where you're going, and erosion and deposition is how you're going to know which one is the right answer. So the first answer says weathering of the soil on the riverbanks. So if I replace weathering with breaking, will breaking of the soil on the riverbanks cause piles of sediments? Nope. When you break something, it doesn't cause these piles of sediments along the bank. How about erosion, the moving of sediments? So will the moving of sediments inside the curves cause these piles of sediments? Will moving of sediments cause piles of sediments? No, in fact, that's going to carry away the piles. So deposition, will deposition of sediments cause piles of sediments? Dropping off sediments, will that cause them to pile up? Absolutely. So do we want deposition by the Yazoo Stream or deposition when the river overflowed its banks that created these levees that are along the river? 4. When the river overflows, it's going to drop off those piles of sediments. Number 4, during transport, so while it's moving by a river, sediment particles will most likely become, let's look at all 4 answers, more rounded, more dense, heavier, or larger. So when a piece of sediment is moving, let's start with more dense. When you're moving a rock from Arcade to Delavan, will it become more dense? No. That would mean it like magically changes. It can't become more dense just because you're moving it from one place to the other. When you move it in a stream, will it become heavier? Oh, sorry. Will it become heavier when you're moving it in a stream? We're talking about a rock. I'm not talking about a sponge or like a towel or even you and your hair and stuff. Does a rock get heavier? No. Does a rock get bigger because you moved it? In fact, it's not going to get bigger. What's probably going to happen to it, which is not an answer. What if I move a rock in a stream, what will probably happen to that rock? It could become smooth. Smaller is what I was getting at. It's going to bump into things and it's going to get smaller. But does it become more round? I need you guys to picture this. Can you picture how rocks would move in a stream? Can you picture this? Kelsey, can you picture a rock moving in a stream? Can you describe it? Does a rock float? No, you knew that. Rocks don't float. How would a rock move? This was the stream from here to here. Oh, she wins with charades. Charades always wins. So rocks don't float. You guys know that. They're not like leaves or sticks. They don't even get picked. Not often do they get picked up and just float in the middle of the river either. If they're tiny enough, yeah. If they're tiny enough, like a piece of sand might get picked up and go in the river. But actual rocks are going to, as everybody did, they're going to roll in a river. The river's going to move them, they're going to roll or slide along the bottom sometimes, but they're going to continually bump against other rocks. And what happens when one rock bumps into another rock? It breaks off pieces. And it eventually, because it's rolling, it's going to become more round and smoother. That's answer 1. And finally, which change would most likely increase the velocity of the river? This is what we did almost all period yesterday? What do you want? I don't have one ready. You gotta warn me.
Okay, can I just see who's here?
No, take them, give them to me when you take the test.
Okay.
So let me know when you're gonna take the test.
Okay.
Okay. All right, so which one will cause the velocity of the river to go faster, right? Is that what it says? Most likely increase the velocity. We talked about this yesterday. Which one of these is gonna speed up the river? What do you think, guys? There's more than just Cynthia in this class. Ted, it looks like you want to answer. Read through the 4 answers and tell me which one's gonna speed up the river. So if we decrease the slope of the river, it's gonna go faster? You read it wrong, because you probably said if you increase the slope. Say it again. Right, so I'm good with what Cynthia said first, so I'll come back to you, Ted. My gut was make the slope bigger. Or increase the slope, make it steeper. That's exactly when I read it. My first thought was make it steeper. But then like Cynthia said, that's not a choice. So with Regents questions, it's important to read through each answer and see if that answer makes sense. So let's read through 2. A decrease in the temperature. Will decrease in the temperature make it go faster? No. In fact, changing the temperature is not going to change the speed of the river unless you freeze it. So if you freeze it, it'll slow it down. But just going from 80 degrees to 65 degrees isn't going to change the speed of the river. How about increase the river's discharge? What's discharge mean? Did this yesterday. Everybody flip back to yesterday's notes and look at discharge. Ted, what's the definition of discharge? It's how much river comes out the end. So if I increase the amount of water coming out of the river, is it going to move faster? Yeah. That's basically if you have a hose, you're turning up the hose. Water's going to go faster. That last one, just to double check, what will increasing the width of the river do? It'll actually make it go slower. So if you keep everything else the same, the amount of water, the slope, and just make the river wider, there's going to be actually it'll decrease the discharge, which will slow down the river. How'd you guys do with these 5 questions? Okay. Anybody else do okay? Nod if you did okay. Shake your head if you thought it was a disaster zone. Okay. All right. So we're going to move on to page 23. There's just a little bit of notes. We're going to start with a delta. Have you heard that word? Maybe in a different class. It doesn't even have to be earth science. Do you remember what class you heard it in? Could have been, it definitely could have been science, but social studies is another one where you've talked about a delta. Do you remember what delta you talked about? Nah. How about the Nile River Delta? Oh, or the Tigris and Euphrates Delta. They were rivers and they did have a delta. We talked about the floodplain in them, but you're right. It was more the flooding there than the actual delta. But Nile River Delta is, well, no, I'm not even going to get into it. What is a delta? It is an area of deposition at the mouth, which is the end of a river or stream. Yep, so this goes at the very top of page 23. So these deltas, again, they're always at the mouth of a stream. Do you guys remember what shape a delta is? Triangle or a V, depending on which way you're looking at it, but it makes a triangle at the end of the river. This occurs when deposition exceeds erosion. What does that mean? Deposition exceeds erosion. Absolutely. So all she did was replace the words with their definition. So deposition, dropping off of things, exceeds erosion, the carrying away of things. So there's more dropping off than there is carrying away. So that means there's going to be a buildup of things. So more stuff is being left than taken away. So it's going to be a buildup. And it's a buildup in this triangle shape at the end of a river. And this is the Nile here. So this is the Nile River, and you can see it's making this V shape off the coast of Africa. Here is a delta really close to us. This is the Cattaraugus Creek, so the same creek over there by Tim Hortons and Cles Boys. But this is at where the Cattaraugus Creek joins Lake Erie. This is actually Sunset Bay. If anybody knows the Sunset Bay Beach Club, Cabana Sam, you might go there in the summer if you hang out at the beach. No? Okay, well, you should go. It's really a nice beach, especially a nice beach for Western New York. But again, you can see, so first of all, this is the Cattaraugus Creek. Why do you think it's so brown? Dirt. Why do you think there's so much dirt in it? When does a creek or a stream get a lot of dirt in it? Oh, not always. When I look at Cattaraugus Creek under the bridge there by Tim Hortons and Cles Boys, it's not dirty most of the time. When it rains a lot, when there's a big storm. So think about that with what we've talked about. What are we increasing during a rainstorm? The amount of water. So there's more water in the stream. So if you put more water in the stream, it goes faster. Remember, if we put more water in a water slide, it goes faster. So if we have more water, it's going faster, and the faster it's moving, the more sediment it can pick up. So during a rainstorm, that's why it gets muddy, is because it's moving faster and picking up more sediment and carrying them away. So you can see here, after a storm, now, no, it doesn't look like it's raining now, but this is the aftermath. So we got a big pile of muddy sediments, and you can see that they're getting brought to Lake Erie here, and they're forming that triangle shape. So here's where the river's slowing down when it hits Lake Erie, and it's starting to drop off the sediments. You can see they do travel out further because they're just teeny tiny sediments, but for the most part, most of them are getting dropped off here in that V shape. But you can see how far these teeny tiny particles are going out into Lake Erie. It's from a drone, like a really good drone, a professional photographer's drone. Or that. It is weird. And that's like the camera is that fisheye kind of look in that first one. So you can see they're pretty high up here. My dad has a drone and it does not go this high. So this guy's got a pretty fancy drone, but he's a professional photographer. It could have been, it's very similar, but I know the guy and it's a drone. No. I went to high school with him. No. No. He's just kind of an idiot. I wouldn't have used those words, but if the shoe fits. All right, let's keep going. So a drainage basin. Do you guys know what a basin is? Not even in terms of earth science. No, nobody's heard of a basin. Yeah, a basin holds, like if you have a water basin, just holds water. Basically, it's like a tub, more like, would be probably, like a cup seems pretty small, but more like a tub, not like a bathtub, but like I don't know, maybe like a bathtub. My in-laws call their ginormous sink in the basement, they call it a wash basin. So if you can picture those big like basement sinks, she calls that a wash basin. But then we've already talked about, it's just kind of weird, so. Or maybe it's me, maybe I'm a little judgy. That's probably not it. So this is just a place that drains and then holds the water. So it's the land that contributes to the water to a river system. I like to go back to Tim Hortons and Class Boys again because it's the perfect example. So can you, and I know I'm not the best artist here, but we have Timmy Hose. Okay, well, we just have to do your best. You guys have all driven by this. If you haven't been there, so Tim Hortons, you leave the parking lot, and you head towards school, you go down a little bit of a hill, right? Then you cross the bridge, and then you go up a hill to Class Boys. Okay, it's a good point, but it's towards the school, not necessarily your way towards the school, but I'm saying you're not driving this way. We were driving that way, but I guess it doesn't matter. And you guys know, apparently I've lost my blue. Down under here is water. Cattaraugus Creek's down under that bridge. I know I'm not the best artist. You're gonna have to work with me. Well, picture this. If I spill my coffee in the Tim Hortons parking lot, where will it eventually drain into?
Probably gonna go into the ground.
Okay, so it could soak into the ground. Now, here's maybe something you guys don't know. The water will soak into the ground and it will still end up in the creek. We haven't got there yet. So here's the thing, can it go the other way? Picture Tim Hortons. Like on the way to Tim Hortons, okay? It's pretty much flat. Like you don't go up a hill to get to Tim Hortons, but you go down the hill once you drive by it. So it's not at, like, it's, okay, where is there an old gravel pit? Behind it? Is it behind it? Or is it toward, which gravel pit are you talking? See, I'm not super familiar with the area. So like if you're looking at it, it's beyond it? Okay, same thing. It just might not go down the hill, but it'll eventually go downhill and get into Cattaraugus Creek back there somewhere too. So if I spill it in the parking lot, it's gonna go down the hill and end up at the bottom of the hill where there's water. Same with, let's picture Class Boys, and if they're over there and they spill gas. Okay, you're right, they did have to build something, but what if they just spilled it? It will eventually go downhill and get into the water, but you're right, they do take precautions so that that doesn't happen. So it will go downhill and go into the water.
Oh, no.
This is the key. This is called a drainage basin. It's like everything drains downhill into this water. And the same is true all over the country. Anywhere you drop water, it's eventually going to drain into a river, and it's always going to flow downhill into a river. Here is the Mississippi River drainage basin. Okay, so anywhere in this dashed area, the water will eventually drop into, if you get it, if you spill your coffee here, it's going to eventually get to the Missouri River, and then that flows into the Mississippi River, which flows out. The Grand Canyon's over here. That's not part of the Mississippi River system. That's the Colorado River. Yep, that's its own river over here. That's over here. So water, it's in the Grand Canyon, will not meet the Mississippi River. It's in a different river system. So anywhere here, so, and also, what do you know, what's over here? Can you picture what's on this part of the country? Rocky Mountains. Should have brought this up last period. And Mrs. Jones would have understood better. So we got the Rocky Mountains. So basically if water falls, raindrops here, on this side of the mountains, it's gonna go this way. Raindrops this way, it's gonna go that way. Do you know what's over here? What? No? What's over here? That's gonna, how about the Appalachian Mountains? Yeah, ever hear of the Appalachian Trail? Okay, got some more mountains here that are kind of blocking it off. So basically we've got two walls that look like this. And if it drops on this side, it's going that way. Drops on this side, it's gonna go this way. What do you notice up here? Huh? It is where it starts, but what, does this place look familiar?
That's where we live.
That's where we live. So Pioneer is like right here. I mean, it might be a little bit over, but Pioneer's right on the edge here. Franklinville, if you spill water in Franklinville, it will end up in the Mississippi River. But if you spray, even parts of Pioneer will, but think about this. I just said Tim Hortons, where's the water gonna go in Tim Hortons? Cattaraugus Creek. And where did I say a few minutes ago, where does the Cattaraugus Creek go? Yeah, but what lake does the Cattaraugus Creek go to? Lake Erie. So our water will go this way if we spill it here. But as soon as you get, the cutoff is Issawa Creek. Issawa Creek does not flow this way. It's gonna end up down here. Is that near you? Pretty cool, right? Or are you not as intrigued as this by it, like I am? Like, I think it's really cool. You're not that intrigued by it? Okay. So we're gonna skip watershed. Watershed and drainage basin are basically the same thing. We're gonna move on to a tributary. I know for a fact you learned this in 5th grade, so hopefully at least a few of you remember. A tributary is a small stream that flows into a larger stream. Lots of you guys have little creeks that run in your backyard or somewhere on your property. And those little streams will either eventually flow probably into Cattaraugus Creek if you're over here. Do you have one? Like these inside your house, is that what you said?
You got a problem, you gotta take it.
Oh, okay. And eventually that probably hooks up to either Issawa or Cattaraugus Creek around here. Depends on where you live. Is there another one? Is there Buffalo? Yeah, because Buffalo Creek Llamas is right up the road, isn't it?
Goes through.
So it all depends exactly where you are, but those little creeks lead to a bigger creek. That'll probably go to another creek, and they all lead into each other. So it's a tributary. All right, I learned from last class that I'm not even gonna bother starting the next section. Whoa. Whoa, that's what happens when you're on a microphone. You gotta be careful when you speak. You guys have homework, page 23 and 24. Certainly isn't gonna hurt to start that now. In fact, you've got about 6 minutes to do 6 Regents questions. Why don't you do those now? What? No, you can just turn it. So that's a good question. I'll just check it tomorrow.